Yay. Welcome back, everyone. So we are live and ready to talk to our next guest in our series. And so I have the pleasure of talking to someone from the Cardinal Rule about all things Arizona Cardinals. I will say that these introductions for me have been like a cool way to kind of be like, hey, welcome, meet this person. And then you introduce yourself. So I will stop talking because this isn't about me. And I would love for you to introduce yourself. Let us know a little bit about you, your channel, what you do on your channel, and just what made you become a Cardinals fan.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I always love talking to football fans across the country. I started making content about 3 years ago because I've been an Arizona Cardinals fan forever. I'm originally from Arizona, but my career has brought me to Georgia, so I felt sort of disconnected from my team and thought, hey, this would be a fun way to kind of talk Cardinals and maybe connect with the Cardinals community a little bit. And it's been all that and then some. I've met a lot of wonderful people who are Cardinals fans, but I've also met a lot of really interesting and cool content creators like yourself and have these conversations. And I have people who are now I consider friends who I've met through this process, which has just been a delight. So, I've been a Cardinals fan forever. Like I'm old enough that I remember when they moved to Arizona. I was
Oh,
14 when
okay.
that happened.
Where were
Um,
they? Where were they before Arizona?
so they were in St. Louis
Oh my gosh. You
in
know what?
1988.
I that's so who I cannot remember who I was talking to. This is crazy. This
Mhm.
this has happened more times than I even realized. The teams moving and being at different places.
Yeah, well, and obviously they were originally in Chicago, right? They're one of the original franchises, and they were in St. Louis for a while. And they moved in 1988 to Arizona, and I was 14 years old when that happened. I was sort of a fan then. I wasn't hugely into sports, but they were then my team. And
Okay.
probably in the 1990s is when I really started paying closer attention to football and the Cardinals. But yeah, I can more or less say I've been a fan since they moved to Arizona, so it's been a long time.
That's awesome. Tell us, what is it like being a Cardinals fan? So, what is something that would surprise us, or what is something like how do you it's a fan base. I feel like I don't know if you all would consider yourself a smaller market team, but I feel like there's certain teams where we always hear about, we always know what's going on. We know way too much information, quite frankly. Sometimes I literally just want to be like, I don't care. We don't hear a lot about the Arizona Cardinals. So I would love to know, what is it like being a fan of Arizona, and how do you feel like you guys kind of don't get, big media attention on certain things unless something's wrong with Kyler Murray? I feel like we don't hear much.
You know that feeling when you stub your toe and you just don't expect it to stub your toe? Being a Cardinals fan is like doing that on a daily basis. Okay, maybe I'm joking a little bit there. No, I think you hit a good point. Like the Phoenix isn't a small market in my opinion. It's a very large metropolitan area, but it's an interesting city that you have this team that moved there, so you don't have the same kind of generational fan base as you do in some other places, right?
Okay.
um, you have a place that's sort of transient, that you have a lot of people from the Midwest in California who moved there. So a
Okay.
lot of people who aren't originally from there, so they bring in their fandom with them. And then you have a team that has had limited success for a number of reasons, which makes it harder to have built that sort of fandom that you would hope.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit, and then they always talk about this on West Coast in particular. There's so many other things to do, and there's so much sunshine, right? People just are less likely to sit around and watch sports. So it does feel like maybe there is this kind of diehard support you would expect someplace like, for example, obviously Green Bay and their fan base
Right.
is amazing, right? So there's a little bit of that sort of kind of tepid support for them. So you have that. And again, there's been some windows of success, Bruce Arians era, the Super Bowl, thanks James Harrison for that interception that I still have nightmares about.
Hey, listen, I thought it was over though when Larry
Mhm.
Fitzgerald, like, because I knew, like, yeah, I was like, oh God,
Yeah.
oh no, oh no. So I was like, we're done. Like, this
Yeah.
is
Yeah. Well, that I still have trauma about that. I still have nightmares about James Harrison returning. Like, can't you just tackle this guy? He's not fast. But
not
no,
at all, not
not
at
at all.
all.
But so
Have you
there's the
seen, like,
yeah.
sorry, way off topic. Have you seen the footage? Obviously, as a Steelers fan, I've seen it. Have you seen the footage of the Steelers practice a couple of days before the Super Bowl?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
It was of that exact play.
Oh no.
In
They-
practice. I just got chills.
yeah.
So there's footage, I'm sure if you Google search it, you can find it. I think it was like 2 days before the actual Super Bowl. It's the exact same play, it's James
Wow.
Harrison, and so that's why when it happened, it was like they knew. It was like everybody.
See, what that tells me is the universe just had it out for us. Like it was ordained.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
goodness.
anyways, go ahead, tell me about your
Well,
Cardinals.
thank you for drumming up the trauma. I really appreciate this. If you want to twist the knife anymore, just invite me back. But no, yeah. So it's Cardinals fan. Being a Cardinals fan, you have to kind of be okay with not a lot of success. There have been windows of that, but I don't know. Maybe that's there's a lot of hope right now for Cardinals fans, especially with
Okay.
the new regime. But yeah, I don't know. You don't have a lot of bragging rights if you're a Cardinals fan. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I think that's valid. It's weird though because I think that sometimes in fandom, you just want your team to be good.
Mhm.
And that's it. You're just like, "Can you guys just win games, please?" And and I've been on record as saying, like, I feel like for what, 2 back-to-back years, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it was like you guys started off 5-0, 7-0,
Mhm.
or whatever it is, and 0. And then I'm like, "Okay, maybe they figured it out." And then you're just like, What
Wheels
happened?"
came off. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I understand you that the evolution of a fan is kind of like the evolution of a
Mhm.
human. You have your ups, you have your downs,
Yeah.
and we're just acting like we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting. I wrote sort of an essay on fandom that there's another guy who writes for the for a blog, Cardinals blog, that I do collaborations with a guy named Walter Mitchell, and he kind of published my essay with some of his own pieces as an article about like kind of optimism as a fan.
mm,
And I have sort of this very kind of I don't know. I look at things a little bit differently. I work professionally as an educator. I have kind of a background in social sciences, and I think a lot about things like contentment and happiness. And I know there's this sort of rhetoric as a fan that winning's the only thing that matters. If it's not a Super Bowl ring, it's a failed season. And I just look at that very different as a fan. As if you're an organization, you want to hold that standard, that winning at all cost standard. Okay, that's your job title. That's fine. As a fan, though, like for me, it's about the experiences. Like if I watch, 17 games and have good experiences and connect with people and have lasting memories, that's not a failed season, right? It's
I
really
love this.
about yeah, like fandom is about identifying with a place for me
Yeah.
as
Okay.
someone born in Arizona, so the Cardinals. It's about making relationships and connections with people who are fans. It's about shared experiences. It's about the exuberance and excitement of draft day and thinking about how are these players going to connect. And like if you're going to tell me that all of that it doesn't matter if they don't win, I'm just going to call BS on that. Like it no,
Hmm.
like as a fan, it's about experiences. And like so if my team doesn't ever win a Super Bowl, I'm not going to consider it time wasted. It brought me a lot of rich experiences. Now there are some people who I think are playing checkers while I'm playing chess who are like, well, that's a loser mindset. Like, well, okay, if I'm a player or a coach, yes, I need a different mindset,
Right.
right? That's the job.
Right.
My job description. My mindset as a fan is let's enjoy this stuff, right? So I view it a little different. And
That's interesting.
maybe being a Cardinals fan is why I look at it that way.
Yeah, well, maybe like the lens and how you're viewing fandom
Hmm.
in a weird way as humans, we have to tell ourselves that it's okay.
Hmm.
And the way that we tell ourselves that it's okay is to figure out a way to make it okay.
Yeah, yeah. Coping is that
But
what you're saying?
now I have a question, and we
Okay.
talked a little bit before this. This question is not on my whatever. Do you think it's the same with college football fans as it is with NFL fans?
It's interesting. Now, I'm not really into college football, so I'm going to
Okay.
speak a little outside my lane. But as a sociologist who studies human behavior, I might have potentially some insights. It feels like college football, more than anything, is much more tribal and kind of identifying with a place,
You're 100
sort of thing.
okay, because I feel that way too,
Okay.
and you know what? If we can table this actually, if you don't mind when this is over, I wanna get your article, and
Okay.
I want to, I have some thoughts about it,
Okay.
and so I think it would be cool to read it and then make an assessment about and tying it to certain things because I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of fandom happening right now, and in every space, not even just football. To be fair, it's almost becoming a weird period in the sports world where basketball is, it's nearing its end. It's just, it's I say it's the lull in sports where football's not here, but we all want it. And so we're
Mhm.
all learning. Like we're all like, okay, one more month. Okay, but it's like, so it's a weird time. So I would love to read it and
Okay.
explore. So anyways, moving on to free agency for the Arizona
Yes.
Cardinals. How was that for you all? Do you think you did well? Obviously, coaching changes, moving and shaking. I think Kyler coming back towards the end of the year beat my Steelers, looked amazing. I think he ended the season well, but I'm curious to know, like, how did you all feel going into free agency? How do you all feel that you did? Did you do anything major that you're really impressed with?
So I have to frame this a little bit because I have a certain view of roster building that
Okay.
is not always the way all fans look at it. Like if you are a fan who wanted the splash moves, you were not happy with the Cardinals free agency.
Okay.
I have this view of roster building that is rooted in some of the analytics thinking and some of the best, I think, the best practices of how you should build a roster, which is you draft heavy, you draft premium positions early and non-premium positions later. In free agency, you don't spend big money on top free agents because you're paying A money for B minus players,
I
right?
agree with that.
And you get yourself serviceable players. You're going to have to overpay a little bit, but there's a big difference between overpaying by 3 million for a defensive lineman who's a solid starter versus overpaying by 10 million for a receiver who's just a little above average, right?
100% agree. Yeah.
So you create a baseline of depth in free agency. You maybe pay a little more for non-premium positions because the overpay on that is less. But premium positions you build through the draft, and if you have to sign those guys in free agency, you don't go overboard. And I think Monty Austinfort, the Cardinals GM, is going by this playbook perfectly.
Okay.
The things they did, they brought in Sean Murphy Bunting, who's a solid cornerback, maybe a little bit of a spend on him, but he's a guy who we needed a cornerback badly. He'll probably be cornerback one for now until one of our rookies or younger players kind of works their way into being cornerback one, but he stabilized that room. So that's a great signing, right? The defensive interior line was a very, very kind of weak spot of our roster. A lot of injuries, a lot of marginal kind of practice squad-ish players. And what they did is they got guys, who had started a lot of games, maybe weren't elite, but were solid NFL players. And they signed like 3 or 4 of those guys, right?
Oh,
They
I like that.
Right. They solidified an area of weakness. They brought in Jonah Williams, tackle from Cincinnati, not an elite player, but DJ Humphreys was injured. They ended up releasing him. So they have Paris Johnson Jr., who started all 17 games at right tackle last year, was early first round pick. So who you anticipate they probably think is going to be their future left tackle. Now, some people still think Jonah Williams will start at left and Paris Johnson at right. But either way, they have 2 solid tackles, not
Good
elite,
bookends. I call them
bookends, right?
bookends. Yeah.
Absolutely. And they brought in a guy, I'd have to look up his name, but who was with Seattle previously with Detroit. Anyway, a guard center with some depth. And there's this great kind of idea about offensive line. Are you familiar with weak link versus strong link approaches to building things?
No, but I teach me.
Okay, so this Malcolm Gladwell did a podcast about this, but he was using it to connect to other things. But there's some conversation about this. Actually, Eric Eager, formerly of PFF, his work, and
Oh
then
yeah.
Consumer Sports.
Yeah.
I had him actually as a guest. Now he recently got a job with the Panthers in analytics, so congratulations to him. But he wrote about this, and there was some. When I had him on as a guest, he talked about this. And the weak link versus strong link approach towards position groups in NFL is kind of where we frame this in that conversation and the way he is in his writing. But there are certain position groups or positions where what's more important is how good is your best player. That's a strong link position. Okay.
Okay.
Then the weak link position is what matters most is how bad is your weakest player. Right. So Malcolm Gladwell, I think when he talked about how soccer is a weak link position, what matters most is how bad is your worst player, right? Whereas basketball is a strong link position, right? Sport, right? You
I can
want
see that.
elite guys at the top and role players on. So certain positions matter. Like offensive line is a weak link position. You are better off having 5 solid but not spectacular starters than you are having a Pro Bowler or 2 and guys that aren't very good, right?
This is good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So offensive line is a weak link position. You want those guys. Coverage is also that, right? Because if you got a weak spot, they're picking at it.
Yep.
You could argue pass rush is sort of a strong link position. If you got 1 or 2 guys that can really move it, the tackles and get at the quarterback, right? So the Cardinals took a weak link approach to offensive line. They got solid, but not spectacular. They didn't overpay, but they brought in some depth. They drafted players. So I feel good about, so in general, when you look at and defensive line, they kind of took that approach. So just the way they approached free agency to me was smart, but
Good.
not flashy.
Okay. I like that. It's foundation building. I
Mhm,
mean, that's what the Steelers do. People always laugh, and I always say like the offensive line is the most important position in football, um, because if you cannot score points, if you're running for your life for some of these quarterbacks, if
yeah.
you actually cannot snap the ball properly, like nothing can go because that's literally the start of the play.
Mhm,
And my Steelers, that's what we do. We build inside out. We always have. I probably know too much about offensive line, nose tackles, and
mhm,
linebackers more than probably anything else because that's just what we do.
mhm,
Um, and it's funny hearing you say that because I think the way that we've probably built our team, and I don't know if they're thinking about strong link and weak link, but I think we do that. I
mhm,
think our weak link is usually our offensive line. They're not great guys, but they're usually good,
mhm.
whatever. But then our defensive line and linebackers are usually, our cash cows. They usually
Yeah.
carry our salary. Um, so that's cool. Obviously I'm going to do more research on that and make some thoughts on that. So thanks for sharing. Let's talk about the draft.
Yeah.
I want to hear your thoughts about the draft. And then, yes, if you're listening and you're a Colorado fan, I will ask him about Xavier Weaver. Hold tight. But I would love to hear about the draft, how you felt going into it, and how you felt like you all did once it was all over, and
Mhm.
you really got to think about some of the guys.
Yeah, going in, obviously, we were very excited, right? You have the 4th overall pick. Everything looked like it was going to line up for Marvin Harrison Jr. to potentially be there for us as long as someone didn't throw a wrench into that and take him before. And it seemed like the first 3 teams were going to take quarterbacks, which they did. We also had the most draft capital overall of any team going
Oh,
into this
cool.
draft.
How
Yeah,
many
in
picks
terms
did
of
you have?
we had 11 and we ended up trading back and getting a 12th. But you know
Okay.
how they kind of value different, they weight the value of picks. So it's not
Yep.
just how many picks, but they give a point value to each. And I saw a couple different quantitative analyses that show that we had the most overall draft capital, even when you consider for position of picks, right?
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, we had like 6 picks in the top 100, something like that.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, yeah, because the trade backs last year, right? We had the Texans first round pick. We had 3 picks in the 3rd round, I think, and we ended up trading and getting a 4th third round pick, right?
That's nice.
So
Okay.
was really excited going into it. Oh, but also was excited because the year before Monty Austinfort came in, and we felt like he had a really good draft. Now, he came in and didn't have the full year to put his processes in place, so
Yeah.
he had kind of work with what had already been there and whatever institutional knowledge he brought with him from the Titans. So, there was even a little bit of, hey, this first draft, he didn't have everything aligned the way he would want, and he still
Okay.
nailed it, right? You got certainly Paris Johnson Jr. started every game, but you have guys like Dante Stills, a 6th round pick who played well for them, and Garrett Williams and Michael Wilson who looked really good. So you had players up and down that draft class that we felt pretty good about. And then going into this year, we're optimistic. Okay, he's got more draft picks.
Yeah.
He's had a year to put his processes in place, and there's a player at the top of the draft that we're all kind of excited about. So it felt really good. And there was a lot of apprehension because a lot of Cardinals fans were fearful that he was going to trade back. My mindset was, I'm okay trading back as long as you get one of the top 3 receivers. Marvin Harrison Jr. to me was the best, but I liked all 3 of the top 3.
Okay.
So if they had a really good offer to trade back and still get, let's say, Roma Dunze, who I really liked, and adding draft capital, I could have been okay with that. But they stayed at 4. They took Marvin Harrison Jr. Everyone has been and continues to be excited about that.
Good.
Yeah, and as the draft went on, like there were players like in the moment that were like, okay, Darius Robinson. Okay, I mean, I knew he had been mocked to them. There were other players I was more excited about. Isaiah Adams in the third round, like, huh, okay, he usually goes later in mock drafts. Tip Ryman, tight end in the third round. Okay. Yeah, there were a lot
Yeah.
of these picks you're like, all right. There were a few that in the moment I loved, like Trey Benson, like to get, one of the top two receiver or running backs in the draft, right, in the third
Yep.
round, and a guy to add to that backfield felt really good. And there were other picks that you felt good about in the moment. But as I had time to look at them and understand why did he take them, you look at Darius Robinson and all the stuff about him, his work ethic, his character, his structure for how he does things. A lot of things like he may not be a high upside star, but he's going to be a solid part of that defensive line. Then you look, I did the video on Tip Ryman, and you look at his athleticism and you look at the untapped potential, like, oh, wait, this is a really exciting pick. And then
Good. That's so good.
there's other players that you're like, I see why. Oh, Xavier Thomas, an edge from Clemson who has these tools, but has had some things that have derailed him a little bit, but has that first step you look for. The offensive tackle Christian Jones in the 5th round, who could develop into a starting right tackle, or at minimum a good swing tackle. So you when you dig into, you're like, oh, I see what
Yeah.
Money was doing there. And he's earned my trust. And there's a lot of upside for these picks, but also character, football character as well. Like, okay, no, I'm really, really kind of excited about this draft class, even if he didn't take some of the players I was more excited about.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and I think it takes, like, quite frankly, an intelligent fan, and a more self-reflective fan
Less
to
reactionary.
go, yeah, to go, "You know what? Let me see how this all goes together. Let
Mhm.
me take a deep breath, and then once I see the total list, it makes a little bit more sense." Sometimes pick 1 and 2 don't make any sense at all, but then once you see them all together, you're like,
Mhm.
"Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. I see what we were going." So that's awesome. So tell me what you think about Xavier Weaver. How are you all feeling? I know he signed as an undrafted free agent. I will be honest with you. One of the things I kept hearing people say is like Xavier Weaver's going to the Cardinals and he's going to get a bunch of money. They really like him and all these things. And so I'm just curious to know, like, what are your thoughts on him? Have you heard any rumblings about him? Like, what are your thoughts? I'm assuming you've taken a little bit of time just to at least see who he is.
Yeah.
So I would love to know like what your thoughts are about him and his skill set.
So, I don't pay close attention to the college game until it gets to kind of, draft season. I look a little bit more
Yeah.
players, but I certainly, looked at his stats. I'm looking at his athleticism measurements now, his RAS stuff. So I think that the thing I can speak most to that might be of relevance to your audience that know more about him than I do
Yeah.
is the situation, right?
Mm,
Um, and he's a fast receiver, relatively fast 4.49 40, right? The agility stuff, shuttle 3 cone, not as great, but straight line speed pretty good size, at least height wise, maybe a little undersized weight. The good explosives in this stuff, vertical and broad. The Cardinals don't have a lot of established receivers. In fact, going into this draft, Michael Wilson was our number 1 receiver, and Greg Dortch, who we all love in Cardinals land, is, I think, underrated, but was our number 2 receiver.
got
Trey
it.
McBride, our tight end, was really our number 1 pass catcher. So now that they've brought in, right, Marvin Harrison Jr., he's clearly the number 1.
Hmm.
They drafted Tajon Palmer out of UAB, who's also another guy with some interesting, speed and skill set. I think Weaver has as good of an opportunity as he's going to find anywhere here in terms of just the fact
Good.
that the room doesn't have a lot of established players. I think, Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, those 3 are solid, firmly
Right. As
entrenched,
they
right?
should be.
Right. And they've earned that, right? Absolutely. But then you've got like Zach Pascal, who's like a veteran special teamer blocker. Okay, but production is just, he's a depth guy, right? You've got Chris Moore, who they signed as a free agent, who's another guy like him who's, had a little bit of, he's got some stats in the league, but he's
Yeah.
not a name that he's a guy who is certainly expendable from a roster perspective. And then you've got Tajon Palmer, who they drafted this year. And then you've got a bunch of guys who are kind of like practice squad guys who've been hanging around for a while, right? So there is an opportunity if we were to establish himself and kind of demonstrate that he's deserving of a roster spot. There's absolutely a chance to make this roster, though. they're going to be tight end heavy, so they might only keep 5 receivers, but right. So
Yeah, that's fair.
he might have to look more at being a practice squad kind of guy. But in terms of, an opportunity, I think this is about as good of a place as he's going to find in terms of just the numbers it being in his favor.
Yeah. You know what's interesting is so I watched both college and NFL, and I consider myself more of an NFL fan because I like the business aspect of it. I feel like I just feel like I don't know, I feel more connected to it maybe.
Mhm.
But one thing I've realized about college football fans is they don't realize what the NFL really is and what it's really about, and that there's only 32 teams
Mhm.
and that they can only carry a certain amount of people, and they respectfully don't care as much about you because it's a business.
Mhm.
It's literally about like, can you help me, yes or no? If you cannot, I will go get somebody else that can,
Right.
week to week to week to week, and you can't do that in college.
Mhm.
And so I always tell people, and I've been trying to say, is like, even if anybody, not just Xavier Weaver, if anybody makes a team, unless you're a first round draft pick, chances are they can let you go whenever they feel necessary. Can they let go of a first round draft pick? Yes. Does it usually happen? No, unless you do
Right.
something outrageously, whatever. But I don't think a lot of people realize how hard it is to make the team and then to stay on the team. It's
Right.
like,
Well, there's this larger conversation about what fandom is, and fans. I'm kind of wired to be analytical. That's just what I do, and it sounds
yeah,
like you are as well. So I'm going to look at it that way. But for most fans, it's an emotional experience. It's
I
kind
can
of
see that.
exercising these kind of primal emotional feelings of tribal.
Uh oh. Can you hear me? Did I lose you? Uh oh.
Hello, can
Oh,
you hear me
you're
now?
back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will tell you, we're having some weather here, so I don't know
Oh,
if you.
okay. It's weird because this is the first day the sun's been out here. And so the first thing I did is I was like, is it going to storm again?
There's actually a tornado watch and now warning where I'm at.
Oh,
So,
wow. Okay. I
so
thought it was me. I'm like, here I go.
no,
Like one time I don't hit record, then one time,
yes,
like, so I think you were just saying like being a
yeah,
fan is like a tribal experience
yeah.
sometimes
It's
for a lot of
just
people.
exercising these tribal warfare, my tribe versus your tribe, and these
Yeah.
feelings of my team is better than yours, and there's such an emotional ethos, and some would maybe argue pathos to this whole experience. And I think this is my very long way of saying fan is short for fanatic, right?
Yeah.
Like and fans are not. Most fans are not going to be rational. They're just going to be in their feelings, as the kids say. And if you've been cheering for this receiver, for example, in the context of this, or any other player at a collegiate program that is you love, and you believe in that player, you don't want to hear rational arguments about
Nope.
why they might be a practice squad player who's going to have to work really hard in special teams to have a chance, right?
Exactly. No, I hear you. Yep. I also think, yeah, you're spot on. I don't even need to add anything to that. You're spot on. So that's why I just wanted to ask because I feel like, and I get it. We all want our people to do good and all that stuff. But I think, there's 32 teams and there's what, 53 roster spots. And I think, what is it now? 16 practice squad, 14 practice squad.
I think it's
Um,
16. Yeah.
and that's it. There, you don't get to hang around. You don't like that's it. That's how it goes. And most teams only travel like 45 or 43. So that number even decreases. So I just don't think everybody pays attention to the bigger picture. But you know what? My job is not to show them the bigger picture. My job is just to bring information and you
There
can
you go.
take it however you want.
Well,
So tell me about some of your concerns heading into the season.
I look at things through such this process lens that I don't have major concerns because this is year 2 of a rebuild. I think they're doing the right steps.
Cool.
There's going to be some areas where there's going to be some limitations because you got young players that they're trying to get experience. You've got other places where they've got a position group where there's not an established player. but maybe half a dozen players with potential, and they're trying to do the Hunger Games thing and see which one survives and ends up being the winner, right? And so I think, like if I had to say an area of the biggest concern, it's pass rush, because we don't have a true established pass rusher. We have, they took BJ Ojulari last year, who showed some signs and was a second round player with some potential. He could develop into a pretty good pass rusher for us, we hope. Dennis Gardeck is, smaller, struggles against the run, but has put up sacks before. But, he's kind of a UDFA who kind of made good on special teams. Zaven Collins, they moved to edge, but he's never been a true pass rusher, and he's more that hybrid kind of run setting edge who, will rush the passer some, but is more versatile, so that he's kind of a unique sort of player in that sense. So there's not this clear who's going to be our pass rusher, right, that we can depend on. And we don't have strong interior pass rush either. We have a few guys who can get to the quarterback a little bit, but you have some teams who may not have a great edge rusher, but they have a legitimate interior pass rush. We have potential and very little established demonstrated pass rush. So that's an area where I think someone's going to show up and end up being better than we thought, but that might be a thing that's in year 3 where they really solidify that and take an edge rusher early next year. Cornerback is a little similar, that, you've got a couple rookies from last year that they drafted last year, Keitrell Clark and Garrett Williams.
So this is their second year. Okay.
Their second year. Plus they drafted 3 cornerbacks, Max Melton, who we're excited about, Elijah Jones out of Boston College, another guy. They drafted Jaden Davis in the 7th round, who's probably more likely practice squad. There's a lot of bodies in that room, plus, Murphy Bunting, who's a veteran. But the question is, how is it going to pan out? So, but that's what you're getting with the young rebuilding team. You're throwing a lot of good potential players in there, and you're going to have to go into it expecting or knowing that there's not a lot of established players there, but someone's going to probably establish themselves, right? So again, the Hunger Games, see who survives.
No, listen, at least you have options to participate in the Hunger Games.
2 years ago we didn't.
I was just gonna say, sometimes I look at teams and I'm like, who else do you have? And I'm like, oh, that's it. Okay. All right. So as of this recording, the schedule is not out yet. I feel like they've moved the date a couple of times, but I would still love to know, since you're in a rebuilding, you all are in a tough division. What are some games that you think about are just always, either a fun experience or always a game where you're like, okay, we're going to be tested. This is it. Or are there any games on your schedule this year that you're like, I'm actually interested to see how this younger team competes with some of these other teams that you might be playing?
Yeah, I mean, the one team that just always seemed, or it's really a player that oddly has our number, is Jared Goff. Going back to the Rams, and with the Lions, they've beaten us, right? Even when we were favored, they beat us. So the Detroit Lions, obviously an ascending team that really has a really great template for the rebuild, the 3-year rebuild, right? They've really hit it right. So certainly that's like, well, how, is that, are we going to struggle with them again? Well, obviously there's, Miami is an interesting team, that track team. How can we keep up with them? But the division games are always your barometer for where you're at, right? Those are the teams that you play twice a year. They know you know them, and it's just a good sense of where you are. San Francisco seems like the class of the division. If we can steal one from them, that is a coup, right? The Rams are kind of in this liminal place where maybe they're good, maybe they're not, but that's certainly that's an interesting litmus test for, are we taking a step forward or not, right?
That's a good one. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Because there's this question, are the Cardinals going to be bad or better than people think? And I think with Kyler Murray and some offensive pieces, I think they're going to surprise people. But if they can beat the Rams, like, okay, they're definitely better than we think. The Seahawks are this team that are also kind of, they're I think people view they're not as good as the Rams, but they're also one of those teams you're not sure about. Are they going to overachieve or play down? They have some nice pieces in the roster, but the quarterback situation is always a question. So to me, that's the team you really look at, because I think most people are predicting the Cardinals still to be 4th in the division, but people who are optimistic think they could maybe be 3rd. So that's the team I feel like we're jockeying with to see who's the cellar dweller and who's ascending.
Okay.
So that's the one I'm probably from a pure kind of where are we at thing. I think Seattle's a team that I'm most closely looking at.
I like that. I have a question just because I'm curious. What do the fans think about Kyler Murray? Are you all happy he's there? We all know we all know his size limitations, like that it's obvious, but he has so many intangibles and so many things he does tremendously well, in my opinion. But how do you all feel about him as a fan base?
Well, as I'm sure you vividly know, fan bases are not monolithic, so there's a range of opinions.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to think about that is more where those opinions are trending because, early on there was a lot of excitement about him, but
Okay.
then as things started to go off, there was a lot of animosity. And then certainly all the stuff in the media that, kind of
Doesn't help.
doesn't help.
Yeah.
So there were, I will say I have the receipts because I have a YouTube channel. I have been a staunch Kyler Murray defender all along, right?
Okay.
I work with college students, so I think some of the stuff about his temperament or disposition were it felt very generational, like boomers just
Mhm.
not liking the young kids. I work with kids all the time, like, no, he's just like, he's a little
Just like
aloof.
everybody else.
He's
Yeah.
just like all these kids. He's a little aloof, maybe a little shy, but not a bad kid, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I've always kind of been a defender. Sure, he needed to mature a little bit because we all do in our 20s.
Yes.
But I think early on there was a lot of people, especially when we going into the season when a lot of people assumed we would have the first overall pick between either our pick or the Texans because we were
Okay.
both supposed to be bad. Obviously, the Texans were not, and we were not as bad. So when we thought we were going to have the first overall pick, the biggest debate in Cardinal world was should we, move on from Kyler Murray, right, and take Caleb Williams. Well, as time went on and we started winning too many games to get that first overall pick, and you started to see the coaching staff and the new regime embrace Kyler, and Kyler really on his end embrace the process, and everything we heard out of the room, out of the building was positive. Part of
Yeah.
that is I think our old general manager, Steve Keim, was maybe leaking a little negativity for
Of
leverage in
course.
contract negotiations, right?
Of course.
Yeah,
And again, something
yeah,
about the NFL,
yeah,
right? That happens where it's like, this is the name of the game. It's
yeah.
like,
It seems like our new GM doesn't do that so much coming from
good,
the Patriots organizations where Monty Fort comes from. And it like the noise out of the building has stopped, right? The negative,
good,
right? So I
good.
think it was the new regime has kind of buttoned that up. So you start like you didn't hear the negative things coming out of the building you were before. And I think that's because of the new GM. And you heard only positive things. And the new coach said, hey, I don't take this job if Kyler Murray isn't here. All the messaging was on point and positive. And then you heard good things about his rehab and Kyler certainly curated his own social media messaging
Mhm.
to show his hard work, which was very, smart and savvy. And then he comes back and you see him committing and he plays well down
He
the
looked
stretch.
great.
Look
He
great,
looked
especially
great.
down the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you hear positive things. And the overall fans were, even though they had only 4 wins, fans were optimistic about the effort we saw
Mhm.
and some of the things down the stretch. So I think the overall momentum has shifted to where fans are more optimistic about Kyler.
Good.
In my videos, I kind of just see things in the comments that give me a thumb on the pulse of fans, so to speak.
Yeah.
And a year and a half ago or so, a year and a half ago, a lot of we need to get rid of that Kyler, this negative, that all these narrative stuff from the media that and whatever disparaging things about him being not only too short, but not a leader and a bad character guy. And I'm like, whatever, but that seems to have shifted. Like
Good.
some
Okay.
people either just don't. There's still some people who think those things, but I hear that a lot less.
Good.
I hear some people who are always have been like, no, I think he's fine. And then some people who don't want to admit they were wrong are like, well, he's grown up now, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah.
There's always a way to make yourself right.
Right, exactly.
Ask any politician; they can figure out, like, amongst the best of us. They're
Right,
like,
exactly.
"Yeah." You're like, "I
So
got you," and they're like, "No, you didn't."
no. Right. So I'm very proud of the fact that I've got the receipts that I have been a supporter all along, so I don't
Good.
have to shift my messaging, right?
Yeah.
But no, it seems like that is less of the conversation. The negativity, it's the Kyler versus Caleb debate shifted to become Marvin Harrison Jr. versus trade back. That
That's all
became
you
the new
need.
debate.
Good.
right, leading up to the draft. Now I'm not really seeing. It's too early, I guess, to see what the debates are, but the sentiment is generally positive. There's some people who just don't like Kyler or think he's too short, but there's a lot more positivity based on how he played down the stretch, as you noted. And Marvin Harrison Jr., now that he's got a receiver to throw to who's, everyone believes is going to be elite, it feels like there's just a much more positive kind of vibe and energy around Kyler and the whole team.
Awesome. Good for him. I mean, I'm from Texas, so
Mm,
Kyler Murray, Texas dominated
mm,
football. So,
mhm.
in high school, I mean, he was phenomenal. So he has it in him. And it takes time. Sometimes not everybody's ready for the moment. CJ Stroud came in ready for the moment.
Yeah.
Not everybody is that, and that's okay. That is totally okay. Well, awesome. That was all I was going to ask you about. I don't know if you have anything else that we didn't talk about that you all are talking about in Cardinals. What do you call like what is the hashtag or the fan
The
base
Red
called?
Sea, the Red
The
Sea,
Red Sea.
or the
Okay.
Bird Gang. Red Sea or Bird Gang. I know them Falcons fan or not Falcons, Eagles fans
Eagles.
like to think they're the Bird Gang, but Bird Gang
Oh,
goes
Eagles
back,
fan.
to Darnell Dockett called us the Bird Gang. So back in the
Got
day,
it. Okay.
but
Is there anything else that you all are talking about? I said this before we started recording. It seems like every team is kind of really excited right now. This is the really excited time of the year. Free agency happened, draft happened. Everybody knows who their coaches are. Rookie mini camps are starting, and it seems like everyone's just excited to get back to football. And every team is going to be better than they were last year. We know how this goes. You know, so I just didn't know if there's anything being talked about amongst you all or anything else that you wanted to add about the Cardinals.
the two biggest kind of sources of excitement for Cardinals fan right now, I've already talked about Monty Ossenfort, like what he's done as GM,
Yeah.
both in terms of how he's approached the draft, how he's approached just like, being a grown up in the room, unlike our previous GM. lot of optimism about our GM, right? What he's done. But the other person that Cardinals fans are really excited about is Trey McBride, right? Really
Hmm.
asserted himself. You look like he wasn't the start at the beginning of the year, finished with over 800 yards receiving and
Okay.
just looked like a beast. Like, former second round pick, tight ends always take a couple years to kind of flourish. So it fits the timeline and narrative for a tight end to develop, right? So second round pick, athletic, struggled a little bit early as tight ends usually do, and then is emerging, kind of at the end of year two. It fits what you expect for someone becoming an elite tight end. So I think a lot of Cardinals fans, and outside of the Cardinals fandom, there's a lot of people I think who share the sentiment that Trey McBride is an emerging star. And with an offense that is, our offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, comes from Cleveland, right?
Mm.
Where they were tight end and run heavy,
Yep.
the kind
Oh,
of
I
offense
know.
we're going to run. Yeah, yeah. As the Steelers fan, vividly as they run that the ball down your throat, right?
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of optimism based on the combination of what this offense is going to look like and what a tight end means in this offense and what Trey McBride showed us, that
Nice.
he's an emerging star and going to be one of the elite tight ends in this league by the time the season is over.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Thank you for being willing to do this and talking to me a little bit beforehand and things like that. I appreciate human connection, talking, having conversations, exercising my brain in ways that you just don't usually get normally. You get to exercise your brain and get to talk about a hobby. So this is amazing. I don't know if you want to tell people where to find you, what you do on your channel, and how things work for my audience, because I'm sure I have some Cardinal fans, especially if Xavier Weaver makes that team. You're going to have a lot of a lot of new Cardinal fans that will want to see what's going on and want to know more about what you all have going on.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube at the Cardinal Rule. I've been doing this for about 3 years now. Cardinal centric, right? I do some live streams talking about things, occasionally do these videos, kind of a deeper dive. Leading up to the mock or to the NFL draft and the months leading up to that, I usually do mock draft Monday live streams where we
Oh, cool.
that's how I kind of learn about the draft class through that. So a lot of stuff Arizona Cardinals, but if you've watched this, you kind of get a sense of kind of how I talk about things. So this is what you
Mhm.
get, a little more analytical, kind of perspective. You can follow me on Twitter at JOKOMO13. It's kind of a weird different spelling of my name, Joe Camo.
I'll make sure to put it in the details
Okay,
too,
awesome,
so that
awesome.
people can see it.
Yeah, so that's kind of those are the main places to find me, and yeah, this is what you get, kind of a kind of nerdy Cardinals talk.
I love it. Listen, I feel like there needs to be a new word for nerdy because honestly, to me, like what as I get older, especially what nerdy means to me, I don't. It's there's no negative connotation, but I
Mhm.
feel like when I was younger, nerdy was negative, and it's totally not. I don't. I wish we could come up with another word that's.
I think it's already been reappropriated because people lean into being nerdy, and
I
it's
love
not.
it
Yeah, it doesn't have that negative. Anyone I who ever I've never heard. I shouldn't say no. In recent years, I have not heard
in recent
anyone
years.
describe
Okay,
someone as a nerd as a disparaging comment.
so maybe I'm like need to
Maybe
catch
you
up.
need to catch up with the fact that it's
What
already been reappropriated.
Yeah, you're right, because there's a lot of times I'm looking in the Urban Dictionary and figuring
Yeah,
out what different
yeah,
three-letter, like, random stuff comes across. I'm like, "What does that mean? Oh, okay. Okay,
yeah,
how do we use that word? Okay, thank you." Like, educate me, please.
yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been amazing. I'm definitely going to check out the article that you mentioned
Mhm.
because I'm interested in the different variation of fandom and how people think and how they I don't know what it is, but I'm just interested to understand more about it. So,
Yeah, for
thank
sure.
you so much for doing this with me.
Thanks for having me.
Of course.